I'm Kendra, and I'm the cuddleologist. Thank you for sharing in the comments where you're watching from. We're going to have an evening talking about touch. I mean, we are all here because we understand the importance of touch. So, I want to talk about why it's important to us and what our barriers are to it. And, you might be here because the pandemic robbed you of those healthy connections, or maybe you've been touch starved much longer than that. Possibly you struggle with romantic relationships, or maybe you aren't ready for one, or you don't want to invest in one right now, and that's totally okay. But society tells us that we have to be in romantic relationships to get that touch need met. Maybe you really love to cuddle, but you don't know how to cultivate that into your life without dealing with the big pressure of having sex with somebody and being in that kind of situation. Or maybe you are suffering from touch aversion. You feel repulsed or fearful when it comes to touch, but you also recognize that you need that in your life and you want to cultivate that. And I'm here to tell you that platonic touch is the answer to all of this. Imagine what your life would feel like if your need for touch was being met genuinely and regularly. Also, I want you to imagine how much less stressful dating would be if you weren't also seeking that physical satisfaction through dating and you already had that need met. And what would your life feel like if touch were a calming experience and if asking for it was easy? Those are all things that are important to us and things that we want to grow in, and that's why we're here. So I want to start off by telling you a little bit about my personal touch journey, because there are barriers to touch that we all deal with, and I want to show you a little bit how I've navigated those barriers for myself. So let me get back into here. Tell me if you're not able to see the presentation, because I have a hard time seeing what's going on here, but I think you should be able to see this. Should have two hands and say calm, confidence, and connection. Let me make sure. Let me see if I can.
Looks good.
Great, thank you. Okay, so my personal journey. Whoops. There we go. Well, first of all, I want to talk about this. This is kind of my motto when it comes to touch. We do not make connection. Connection exists. We simply allow it to happen. So when we're not able to have these genuine, easy-flowing connections in our lives, it's because there's some kind of barrier, and that can be a societal barrier, a way of thinking. It can be our own personal feelings about our own worthiness, or it could be a physical barrier. You know, the pandemic definitely is a good example of that. So when we are able to allow it to happen or find ways of allowing it to happen, we can cultivate that in our lives. So for me personally, I had a lot of beliefs that got in the way of connection for a while. And the first one is that I believed I had to be someone else in order to have connection. I believed that I had to fit into a mold of what other people thought I should be in order to have that connection. And so at the beautiful age of 16, I joined a religion so that I could feel some belonging. And it worked for a while because they give you this nice way of behaving and say, this is what you do to fit in. And it was so easy because it said, this is what you do, and I did it. And that fulfilled that need in a way, but later I discovered that that was not conducive to genuine connection. It was forced. And then the next barrier I had is that I believed messages from society, Disney, that told me that I only needed one person to fulfill all of the connection and love needs I had. And so when I got married, my connection to other people was killed because I relied only on that one person for that connection. I stopped seeing my friends, hanging out with them. I definitely wasn't cuddling with my girlfriends anymore, or enjoying giving somebody a back scratch just because we were sitting next to each other and it was a nice thing to do. Because I felt guilty connecting with others, because to me, it felt like it was taking away from my partner instead of adding to my life and therefore their life. So I believed in those messages. And I also believed that my needs didn't matter, which this led me to put other people's needs before my own. I got very good at people pleasing and regulating other people's emotions, and even, as icky as this sounds, manipulating other people's behavior to get what I needed, because I felt like if I stated plainly what my needs were and stuck up for them, that I was going to be rejected. And that led to resentment. I felt resentment towards the people who weren't meeting my needs and who I was placating myself for. And I also felt resentment to myself for not sticking up for myself. So I had to get rid of these barriers, and I'm going to walk through what I did to get rid of them. So the first one started with the work of Brené Brown, who is a psychology researcher that specializes in shame and vulnerability and connection and wholehearted living. And she talked about fitting in versus belonging. Now, as a person who joined a religion that told me exactly what to do, it was super easy to fit in there. However, I wasn't showing up as my authentic self. I was showing up as the person I was being told to be. I had this nice list of, you behave this way and this way and this way, and you're a good Mormon girl. And what happened is I was listening to Brené Brown, and she described fitting in as adjusting our own behavior and self to be accepted by a group, where belonging is showing up as our authentic selves and being accepted that way. And that blew my mind. I listened to it probably 30 times over. I remember sitting in my car and I had this disc in, and I just kept backing up and listening to it again. And I'm like, is this really what she's saying? And that started that transformation of believing that I could be my authentic self, and that was worthy of people loving and accepting. The other part that played a big role is Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I know that's, you didn't expect to hear that probably, but he actually spent a fair amount of time studying child psychology, which, as we all know, our inner child doesn't ever really leave us. So the things that he was speaking to those preschool age children still apply to us as adults. And I'm going to read this quote from him that spoke to me so well. And it says, "Knowing that we can be loved exactly as we are gives us the best opportunity for growing into the healthiest of people." This idea allowed me to accept myself even in my most depressed state. And being able to accept myself that way was the start of having growth. So changing this idea of I believed that I had to be someone else in order to have connection to, I am worthy of love and belonging exactly as I am. Now, the second message, I believed that society was telling me that I could only get connection from my partner or spouse. And what changed this was I left the church that I was a part of. And when I did this, it caused me to question literally everything I'd been taught or believed. And that was not just doctrine from the church. I was questioning my things I was told in my upbringing, family sayings, values. I was questioning the way society functioned. And it was a very skeptical time, but it was interesting to see what kind of bullshit, if you will allow me that, what kind of bullshit exists when you put everything under a scrupulous microscope. And when I did that, my view of the world changed drastically. And instead of limitation, I saw possibility. And I started having a mindset of possibility, which was incredibly empowering. So I went from believing the messages of society to the way the world is does not determine my world. And that was huge. It allowed me to dream and to invest in possibility and in my adventurous ISFP side, and really hold on to those dreams. So after that, I was working on I believe my needs don't matter. And this is a big struggle, but especially for people who are people pleasers, because it's so ingrained into how we try to attain affection, that it takes a long time. And what it really takes is learning to trust ourselves. So I did a couple of things. After leaving religion, I also quit my job. I was a music teacher, and that was very fulfilling, but I also knew that wasn't where I wanted to be because I wasn't able to sing after work. I didn't have energy to connect with people. I was frustrated with the public education system. And so I quit. And also at that time, I was struggling with a lot of health issues that nobody could diagnose. The doctors were struggling. They couldn't tell me what was going on. So I was focusing on my health and doing things like yoga and going to the doctor and trying new supplements, new medications, I did lots of different things, new agey stuff, tried some energy work to shift things in my body, and was making minimal progress. And then one day I thought, you know what? I feel like my gut is telling me to work on my diet, specifically to cut sugar out of my diet. But also that I thought I could try this thing my doctor threw out there called an elimination diet, which meant I took out way more than sugar. So I took out all of these things that could possibly be causing inflammation or issues in my body. And I was very disciplined during that time, and I only ate what was non-inflammatory, not an issue, and then later tried things out to see what was an issue and what wasn't for me. But it was the first go around was a good 4 weeks, and that seemed like a lot at the time, but I started to feel better, and I started trusting myself more. And so I got really excited. I was like, oh, this is working. And I invested in a cookbook, which at the time I was like, I can't get a cookbook. I don't have a job. But it was a $30 cookbook, and it radically changed my life. Delicious foods that were satisfying but also weren't causing those issues. And I ended up going off sugar again a few months later, and stayed off of it for a good 2 to 3 months, which people are like, how did you do that? Including I didn't eat fruit. But it wasn't about like the challenge of it. What it was about is that I taught my body that I would take care of it. And because my body believed that I was taking care of it and was like, yes, you are, you're listening to me, you're paying attention, and I was very in tune with what my body needed, it started to trust me again and started to tell me new things and say, you need this, Kendra, you need that. And the more I listened, the more it trusted me, the more I felt safe with myself. I started singing again, which that started as being in a community choir, and I had a solo singing For Good from Wicked, which grew into, now I live in New York City, and I just completed my first paid role on stage as an opera singer singing with other professionals. And that, this is in a matter of 3 years. And And it's because, again, I started trusting my intuition and believing that what I wanted mattered. And I continue to do this. So going from I believe that my needs don't matter to thank you, Frankie, to my needs matter and I'm capable of meeting them. Okay? That is huge when it comes to us being able to navigate those conversations of touch, is to recognize what are the barriers and then work to get ourselves to a place where we have a new message that we believe in. And these are the new messages that I believe in. So I want to say, like, we can do that for anybody wherever you're at, but you've got to figure out what your barriers are. And that's what I do in my coaching program with people. So, but if you want to get started, of course, you can just you can start asking yourself, what are my barriers? Write those down, and then try and shift that over to a possibility statement or an affirming statement. And it will take work and it will take time, as you can see, but the results are significant. Now let's talk about touch starvation, because that's probably why, like, the main reason why you're here. You saw my touch starvation video on TikTok, and I want to say that touch starvation it's like a hunger. We crave touch. However, technically, we can live without it, right? Technically, we can. So we aren't as aware of that craving. You know, if we can go without something, our body might not speak up about it. And that goes back to, you know, like for me, knowing what my needs are was like really listening to my body. So we need oxytocin, and our body will tell us, whether consciously or subconsciously, how to get it. You know, that's when we're pulling out the Tinder app and we're like, why am I doing this? Yeah, so those are things to pay attention to notice if you're in touch starvation. Is that coming up in a way that isn't authentic? Like, are you seeking out things just because you're lonely, or you're in that need for touch, rather than, oh, I genuinely am looking for someone to connect with and I'm excited about that. And I'm not going to go into the details of the touch starvation cycle or talk more about the detrimental effects of touch starvation. I have plenty of that material on social media, and you can go through that, and that's probably why you're here anyway. So let's talk about the solutions now. So ways to boost oxytocin. And I'm curious if any of you have tried any of these things and what your experiences are, or if you have tried something else that maybe worked or didn't work. So here we go. Here are some things you can do to boost oxytocin in the body. And I want to talk about the mechanics of this first. So what we're doing when we're trying to boost oxytocin in the body is we're trying to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And that nerve runs right here. So I like to touch right here when I'm talking about it. And what that does is it calms the body, and it is a response to the fight, flight, freeze mode. And so when we do things that activate that calming system, and even, you know, self-massage works too, it helps to bring us back into a state of calm and reduce that level of cortisol and increase oxytocin. So you can try meditation, yoga, and especially the pranayama that goes along with yoga. All of the breathing exercises are very beneficial for activating that. Socializing, and so, like, I'm not talking about touch, but even messaging can be helpful. But, you know, the more personable it is, if you can hear the inflection of somebody's voice, see their face, that is much more beneficial than if we're just interacting with text on a screen. But also with socializing, something that is particularly helpful is when we are sharing affection. So it's not just about what we get, it's what we give. When you express genuine affection to other people, saying things like, I love you, I care about you, you're important to me, of course, it's affirming to the person we're saying it to, but it also boosts oxytocin in our bodies. So we're getting something from that. And of course, I know I get a lot of questions about this. Do pets count? Yes, pets count. Holding our pets, petting our pets, cuddling with them definitely is a great way to release oxytocin in the body. Getting some sunlight, because vitamin D is essential to that oxytocin production in the body. And listening to music you love, particularly for me, it's about dancing and getting in my body. So I like to put on some music. In fact, I did this right before this to help me calm down and get in a good headspace to talk to you all. I just turned on a playlist that I call anthems, and it's all of the songs that get me feeling really powerful as a person and grounded, and I dance to it. And then, of course, touch is the number one way that we can get oxytocin, and the most effective. So, oh, I love that, Frankie. That sounds like a great way to wind down every night, to dance with your headphones in and listen to your music. So touch is the number one way. And all of these things can help. They can be soothing. We can regulate ourselves in times of famine, but I don't want you to just soothe your hunger pains. I want you to be touch satisfied. And touch starvation is something I'm very familiar with. Even when I was in a situation where I should, and I put that in quotes because should is a 4-letter word in my mind. I had a sticky note that said fuck should on my refrigerator for years, and sometimes I think I should still put that back. But I was in a situation where I should have been touch satisfied. My partner and I cuddled every single day. However, it wasn't meeting my needs, and I wasn't speaking them, or if I was, they weren't being heard. If the touch we're getting is not satisfying, it can have a nil or negative effect on our lives and won't actually produce those beneficial calming effects. So when we're not able to communicate our needs, we suffer. And it wasn't until someone placed their hand on my shoulder and they started rubbing my arm like this very gently back and forth. And if you notice how the speed of my thumb, the optimal speed for the release of oxytocin in the body is 3 centimeters per second. And that's about what this is. And for some reason that was missing. And I tried to communicate that, but it still wasn't happening in my relationship. But when that happened, it was like fireworks went off in my head, and I knew something very valuable was missing in my life. And I don't know if any of you have had an experience like that, but it can be perspective altering. I'm going to end this presentation part. So that radically adjusted how I was seeing touch and started me on a whole path, which has led me here. I mean, I became a snugglist. I worked with other snugglists, trained them and such. We're getting towards the end of our time. And what I want to do to wrap this up, because tomorrow what we're going to do is dive deeper into what it takes to thrive with touch instead of merely survive in soothing, like to actually become touch satisfied. But I want to do an exercise with you all, and I will lead this, and go ahead and try this with me. But this is an exercise to help invite calm into your life. So this is another thing you can do to boost oxytocin and activate that parasympathetic nervous system. So we're going to take our hands and place them on our chest, And not just let them, you don't just want to let them rest, you want to actually apply pressure. And lift your chest up to your hands and press your hands into your chest so that you're feeling that weight. And then breathe into your hands. And then exhale. And now I want you to try and take an even deeper breath. So you'll feel it in your hands, you'll feel it in your lower abdomen, and maybe even in your back, your lower back. Take a deep breath. And out. And you can let out an audible exhale. No one's going to hear you. You're all muted. So now we're going to do that one more time, and then we're going to shift our focus. So take one more deep breath. Now ask yourself, where are you feeling stressed or tension in the body? And let your hands not lose contact, but make their way to that place. For me, it's always my shoulders. It could be your arms. It could be your neck. It could be maybe your back. Find that spot. I'm going to get into a nice hug here with myself, neck and back. And I want you to breathe into this. And when you breathe in, we're going to tense up and squeeze. And then we're going to relax it. And what this does is it helps to remind our bodies that we're safe. So you should notice an insane sense of relaxation after you release this. So everyone together, squeeze, breathe in, hold it, and relax and let go. And if you want to shift, you can shift, or you can stay in the same position. You can find a different spot to do this release with. Again, breathe in, squeeze, tense, hold, and relax. And you can do this as a squeezing, releasing activity. I like it because it activates that touch sensation. You can also just do it by tensing and releasing, and do it as a body scan. Start at your feet, work your way up, gradually tensing up the muscles and then releasing that tension. And you should feel, I feel more relaxed right now. You should feel some relaxation.
Thank you for watching day 1 of my 3-day webinar, Calm, Confident, Connected, all about cultivating more satisfying touch in our lives and getting out of touch starvation. If you are excited about getting started on your touch journey and transformation, head to my website where you can check out all the information I have there on what you will feel and what your life will look like as you go through my program. After that, get started on the application process, and we'll see if this feels like the best fit for your touch life.